The papacy was foretold in Bible prophecy in both the Old and New Testaments. Today we'll take a look at each of those prophecies and find out exactly what the Bible says about it. We're going to begin in Daniel chapter 7. Beginning in verse 1, it says, "In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream, and visions of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the heaven strove upon the great sea, and four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I beheld, and lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking great things." So here we have 4 animals, a lion, a bear, a leopard, and then another beast that's just called dreadful and terrible. It's not likened to any particular animal that we have on earth today. And then in this 4th beast were 10 horns, and then another horn came up after that on the head of this 4th beast. So we go to verse 15. "I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit in the midst of my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. I came near unto one of them that stood by, and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me, and made me know the interpretation of the things. These great beasts, which are 4 kings, which shall arise out of the earth." Verse 23. "Thus he said, the 4th beast shall be the 4th kingdom upon earth." So there the Bible tells us what these beasts represent. They are 4 kings or 4 kingdoms. We remember in Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar, the king, had a vision or a dream at night of a large image that was composed of different metals. The head was made out of gold, the breast and arms of silver, the belly and thigh of brass, the legs of iron, and the feet of iron and clay. And we found out when we studied that prophecy that this was foretelling the empires that would rule on the earth, starting with Babylon, which was the head of gold, and then it would be followed by Medo-Persia, which would be followed by Greece, and then would be followed by Rome. And then the feet of the image represented when Rome was broken up into these smaller kingdoms. And so that was the vision that was in Daniel chapter 2. So let's apply those same kingdoms to this vision in Daniel chapter 7. Daniel 7 verse 4 says the first beast was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Now these symbols denote Babylon. In Jeremiah chapter 4, Babylon is symbolized as a lion, and in Ezekiel chapter 17, Babylon is described as a great eagle with great wings. And so these are symbols of Babylon. Daniel 7 verse 5 says, "And behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side." Now, this second kingdom would be that of Medo-Persia. And so in Cyrus, these two kingdoms combined. And when Cyrus took over the kingdom of Media, he established the Medo-Persian Empire. But the Persians were the more powerful of the two. And so that's why the bear is described here as being raised up on one side. It goes on to say, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. Now, if you come across a bear in the woods and he's got 3 ribs in his mouth, what do you know he's been doing? Well, he's been devouring other animals. And so this says that this kingdom of Medo-Persia, as it arose, would conquer 3 other nations. Now, when you look at what the map looked like in the year 550 BC, we have Medo-Persia, but it had 3 rival kingdoms that it had to do away with. And that was Lydia, Babylon, and Egypt. And so those would be the 3 ribs represented there in the mouth of the bear. Daniel 7 verse 6, after this I beheld, and lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. So those wings would represent swiftness, the swiftness with which the Greek Empire, Alexander the Great, conquered the entire then known world. And then it says that he had 4 heads also. Well, Alexander died at a young age and had not arranged for any particular successor to his kingdom. And so the various generals in his army kind of fought it over for a while, and it eventually settled into 4 different Greek kingdoms that represented the 4 heads on this leopard. Daniel 7 verse 7 says, after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth, and it devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Verse 19, then I would know the truth of the 4th beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, and his nails of brass, which devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with his feet. And of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes, and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints, and prevailed against them, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints should possess the kingdom. Thus he said, the 4th beast shall be the 4th kingdom upon earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. And this, of course, would have been the Roman Empire, which was also the 4th kingdom in the Daniel 2 vision as well. It says in Daniel 7:24, and the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise. Now we know that when the Roman Empire was broken up after the year 476 AD, when the last Roman emperor was deposed, the territory of the Western Roman Empire was broken up into these various barbarian kingdoms. So this is what the map looked like in AD 476 after the deposing of the last Western Roman emperor. So that's the 10 horns that were on this beast, the 10 kings that would arise. And it says in Daniel 7:24, and another shall rise after them. So it would be another horn that would come up after these 10 horns were there. Another shall arise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. So this other power that came up would be the papacy. A.C. Flick, in his book The Rise of the Medieval Church, page 150, says, "Out of the ruins of political Rome arose the great moral empire in the giant form of the Roman Church." Now, as the papacy arose, which ultimately would become the most powerful entity in Europe down through the Middle Ages, as it arose, it had a problem, and that is that these 10 barbarian kingdoms that had come in and settled in the former territory of the Roman Empire, they were not Catholic. They were what we call Arian, or what they called Arian, which was a derogatory term for Christians who were not Catholic in persuasion. There were 2 of these kingdoms, the Franks and the Anglo-Saxons, that were pagan, but all the rest of them were Arian. Now, since that was a different religion from what the papacy was trying to establish, the papacy could not actually have supremacy in the West until they subdued these kingdoms. Now, the 3 biggest kingdoms that had to be dealt with that were impeding the progress of the papacy the most were the Visigoths in Gaul and Spain, the Vandals in North Africa, and the Ostrogoths in Italy. And these kingdoms had to be subdued in order for the papacy to gain power. And so the Visigoths were subdued by the Franks in 508. The Vandals were subdued in the year 534 by the Roman general Belisarius, and the Ostrogoths were subdued in the year 538, also by Belisarius, as he was sent by Justinian to reconquer the West. So those are the 3 horns that were uprooted as the papacy came into power. Now we're going to turn to Revelation chapter 13. And there we begin in verse 1. It says, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy." Now this beast in Revelation chapter 13 is the same as the little horn in Daniel chapter 7, has the same characteristics. So let's take a look a little bit more at this beast in Revelation chapter 13. It says in verse 2, "And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority." So there we have the 4 beasts that were in Daniel chapter 7. The leopard, the bear, and the lion. Now what that represents is that the kingdoms of Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece would lend their influence to the papacy. As the papacy arose, it had characteristics of these former kingdoms. And the dragon was representative of the 4th kingdom, which was Rome, out of which the papacy arose. And it says that the dragon gave the papacy his power and his seat and great authority. Well, in the year 533, the Emperor Justinian wrote a letter to the Bishop of Rome and said, "You are the head of all the holy churches, for we shall exert ourselves in every way to increase the honor and authority of your see." It was this letter that, effective upon the Ostrogoths' abandonment of Rome in 538, established the supremacy of the Pope. But the text also says that the dragon gave him his seat. A bishop's seat, or cathedra, is the chair or throne that symbolizes his teaching authority in the church. For a bishop to speak ex cathedra, or from the chair, gives his declaration official status. The basilica, or church building in which the cathedra is installed, is known as a cathedral. The cathedral of the Bishop of Rome is the Archbasilica of St. John Lateran in the heart of the city. the Pope's official seat is located in the apse of that cathedral. The cathedral is part of a palace complex originally belonging to a ruling Roman family from the time of the Republic. The Emperor Constantine gave this property to the Bishop of Rome, and it became Roman Catholicism's first church. So, literally, the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. Verse 5 says, "And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies." So what's blasphemy? The Bible gives a couple of different definitions. In John chapter 10 and verse 33, it says, "The Jews answered him, saying, For a good work we stone thee not, but for blasphemy, and because that thou, being a man, makest thyself God." So when a man presents himself as God, that's blasphemy. Well, Pope Leo XIII said, "We hold upon this earth the place of God Almighty." See, the popes claim to be in the place of God on earth. In fact, in the Fifth Lateran Council, Session 4, Christopher Marcellus gave an oration in which he said, "For thou," speaking to the Pope, "for thou art the shepherd, thou art the physician, thou art the director, thou art the husbandman. Finally, thou art another God on earth." There's another definition of blasphemy that the Bible gives, and that's found in Luke chapter 5, verse 21. It says, "And the scribes and the Pharisees began to reason, saying, Who is this which speaketh blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God alone?" Because Jesus had just forgiven the sins of the man that they brought to him on a stretcher. And so they're saying that this was blasphemy to be able to forgive sins because only God can forgive sins. So does the Roman Church claim to be able to forgive sins? Well, this is from the Catholic Encyclopedia. It says, "Absolution is the remission of sin or of the punishment due to sin granted by the Church. Absolution proper is that act of the priest whereby in the sacrament of penance he frees man from sin." And so people go to the priest, confess their sins, and receive forgiveness. And that is what the Bible calls blasphemy. The Bible goes on to say, "And power was given unto him to continue 42 months." Now this 42-month period is the Bible's most emphasized time prophecy. It's actually found in the Bible 7 different places under 3 different expressions. There's the 1260 days, 42 months, or a time and times and half a time. Those are all talking about the same period of time, 1260 days. Now, we looked in an earlier study on about the year-day principle, where we found that in Bible prophecy, each prophetic day stands for 1 literal year. And we talked about that in the video called "The Key to Apocalyptic Time Prophecies." So with 7 prophecies in the Bible specifically mentioning this 1260-day period, it's actually a 1260-year period, the Bible was predicting that the papacy would have supremacy for 1,260 years. And that was exactly the way it turned out. So that was from 538 to 1798 is 1,260 years, exactly fulfilling these 7 time prophecies given in the Bible about it. Revelation 13 verse 6 says, "And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them, and power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations." So it said that the church would persecute people. Well, in W.E.H. Lecky's book, History of the Rise and Influence of the Spirit of Rationalism in Europe, he writes that the Church of Rome has shed more innocent blood than any other institution that has ever existed among mankind will be questioned by no Protestant who has a competent knowledge of history. As we read on, it says, Llorente, who had free access to the archives of the Spanish Inquisition, assures us that by that tribunal alone, more than 31,000 persons were burnt, and more than 290,000 condemned to punishments less severe than death. The number of those who were put to death in the Netherlands alone in the reign of Charles V has been estimated by a very high authority at 50,000, and at least half as many perished under his son. And when to these memorable instances we add the innumerable less conspicuous executions that took place, from the victims of Charlemagne to the freethinkers of the 17th century, when we recollect that after the mission of Dominic, the area of the persecution comprised nearly the whole of Christendom, and that his triumph was in many districts so complete as to destroy every memorial of the contest, the most callous nature must recoil with horror from the spectacle. Nor did the victims perish by a brief and painless death, but by one which was carefully selected as among the most poignant that man can suffer. This was the physical torment inflicted on those who dared to exercise their reason in the pursuit of truth. When we consider all these things, it can surely be no exaggeration to say that the Church of Rome has inflicted a greater amount of unmerited suffering than any other religion that has ever existed. Well, let's go now to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. There we read, beginning in verse 1, Now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and by our gathering together unto him, that ye be not soon shaken in mind, or be troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter as from us, as that the day of Christ is at hand. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. The Greek word there for falling away is apostasia, meaning apostasy. There would be an apostasy coming in the church. The church would fall away from the truth. And that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. We've already seen some of the blasphemous claims made by the Papacy. So we're going to go back now to Daniel chapter 7. Pick it up in verse 25. It says, And he shall speak great words against the Most High. We saw that. And shall wear out the saints of the Most High. We saw about that persecution. And think to change times and laws. So the Pope would feel that he has the authority actually to change times and laws. In this instance, he's talking about the times and laws of God. Does the papacy actually claim to be able to change God's law? Well, here's a reference from Lucius Ferraris, Prompta Bibliotheca, and it says, The Pope is of so great authority and power that he can modify, explain, or interpret even divine laws. See, the Bible said that he would think to change times and laws. Petrus de Enchirano very clearly asserts this in Conciliar 373, number 3, verse 0. The Pope can modify divine law, since his power is not of man, but of God, and he acts in the place of God upon earth with the fullest power of binding and loosing his sheep. So, the Bible says that he would think to change times and laws, and there we see that the Pope claims to be able to do that. Well, did he do that? If you look in the Convert's Catechism of Catholic Doctrine, it says, question, which are the 10 Commandments? Answer, the 10 Commandments are, and then it lists them, but notice that as it lists these, it's missing one. So number 1, it says, I am the Lord thy God, thou shalt not have strange gods before me. Number 2, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. So it completely missed the Bible's second commandment, which says, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven images. So, since the Catholic Church has a lot of graven images, they didn't want to have that commandment, so what did they do? They just took it out. And the third commandment became the second all the way down. Now the problem comes when you then only end up with 9 commandments. And so what they did was they split the 10th commandment into 2. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife became the 9th commandment, and thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods became the 10th commandment. So here we see that the papacy thinks to be able to change God's law. But that's not all that the verse said. It said he shall think to change times and laws. Well, the only law of God that has to do with time is the 4th commandment, which to the Catholics is the 3rd commandment. Notice what it says there in the Convert's Catechism of Catholic Doctrine. Question: which is the Sabbath day? Answer: Saturday is the Sabbath day. Question: why do we observe Sunday instead of Saturday? Answer: we observe Sunday instead of Saturday because the Catholic Church transferred the solemnity from Saturday to Sunday. They claim the ability and the right to change God's law by changing the day of worship from the 7th day of the week to the 1st day of the week. Here's an article in the Catholic Mirror, September 23, 1893, which said, "The Catholic Church, for over 1,000 years before the existence of a Protestant, by virtue of her divine mission, changed the day from Saturday to Sunday." So, fulfilling Bible prophecy that he would think to change times and laws. Daniel 7:25 continues, it says, "And they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time." And of course, that's that 1260-year period that we looked at earlier. Now, we're going back to Revelation chapter 13. In verse 3, it says, "And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death." On February 10, 1798, a force of 10,000 French soldiers under the command of General Berthier entered Rome. On February 15, the papal government was supplanted by a new Roman Republic, and on February 20, Pope Pius VI was taken into custody and escorted from the city. He died in exile. Well, what's interesting about that is that at that point, when that happened, the world basically considered the papacy to be dead. The papacy was extinct. Not a vestige of its existence remained, and among all the Roman Catholic powers, not a finger was stirred in its defense. The Eternal City had no longer prince or pontiff. Its bishop was a dying captive in foreign lands, and the decree was already announced that no successor would be allowed in his place. Well, we know that eventually a successor was announced, but the point is that the world considered the papacy here to be dead. He had received a deadly wound. But Revelation 13:3 goes on to say, "And his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast." Over the years, the papacy has risen to become one of the most powerful institutions in the world in political, social, and religious influence. Verse 4 says, "And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him?" Verse 8, "And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world." Now that's quite a warning there. Verse 18, "Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Now, Revelation gives us 4 clues about this mystical number. It says it is the number of the beast, it is the number of a man, it is the number of his name, and with understanding one can count the number. So it's the number of the name of the man who is the beast. Although disputed by some, A title reflecting this number has often been applied to the Pope. That title is Vicarius Filii Dei, which means Vicar of the Son of God. Now, I may do a whole video on this subject later, but for now, we'll just notice that this title has a numerical value of 666. So let's go back to the book of Daniel, chapter 7, and it says, "But the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion, to consume it and to destroy it unto the end." So that's what Bible prophecy has to say about the papacy. And now we also know where Sunday worship came from. The original New Testament Christians worshipped on the seventh-day Sabbath. You can find out more about that in the video, The Sabbath in the New Testament Church. Thanks for liking and sharing this video. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and we'll see you later.